We are here to bring you into a harmonic resonant vibration.
And to join together in humming. A lot of people say they can't sing, but everyone can hum. And we're all united with a joint passion and vision for our future, for our climate, for the earth. A really important way of joining together, a really profound way, is through vibration, through this humming.
So if we could all take one breath in and
seconds.
one hum together.
Yeah, 30
Everybody?
seconds. Everyone taking a
Take
deep breath. And exhale with your mouth closed through your nose.
One more time. Third time's the charm.
Is this on? Yes. Thank you, hummers. I'm on yet. Is this on? Is it really? Right up there? I'm the second oldest of 7 children. When I tell people to come in, they all come in. Not really. Good evening, everybody. Come on in. I'm Peggy Flynn. I'm the co-president of the Democratic Women's Club, along with my good friend and colleague, Carol Fuller, who, as always, is working behind the scenes to make things right. So thank you, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for coming. What a week. What a time to be talking about climate, yes? So thank you all for coming. Thank you for our speakers. Thank you to Cabrillo. I don't see Matt Wetstein yet, but we wanted to thank Cabrillo for this venue. And the most important thing, or the most exciting thing, was when we got free parking for everybody. That made everybody really, really happy. So I want to thank our co-sponsors, Gail Pellerin, our Assemblywoman, the Democratic Central Committee, Andrew Goldenkrantz is here somewhere. And thank you again to all of our speakers and to our committee, which was Donna Myers, our former mayor, Tracy Weiss, sorry, from O'Neill's The Odyssey, and Cindy Jacquedet, Democratic Women's Club. There she is, so thank you. So I'm gonna turn it over to Donna Myers, our former mayor, and also a woman with a deep, deep background in environmental issues. All right? You got it.
Well, we want to welcome everybody tonight, and we want to especially tonight just recognize, and I know many of our speakers will probably do the same, but certainly Santa Cruz County has been through a lot in the last 6 months, actually the last 4 years, 5 years. We want to recognize there's a lot of families, individuals, businesses, community members, neighborhoods that are suffering right now, and we want to just encourage everyone to do what they can to help. And so whether that's working with some of our local nonprofits that are helping directly, volunteering, helping at the food bank, Second Harvest, we just want to really recognize tonight, and I think Senator Laird will speak to some of this. You know, we're living in a very different time. We're living in a different county. I've lived here for 40 years, and I've seen things in the last 4 years that are very different than my experience when I moved here, 40 years ago. So we'll talk about a little bit about that tonight. I also want to recognize some of our elected leaders here this evening. Supervisor Justin Cummings from 3rd District. I believe I saw Lowell Hurst come in. I don't know. There's Lowell right there. Of course, Gail Pellerin and our new assembly member that we're just thrilled about. You will meet a guy named John Laird in 1 second. Is there any other electeds that I missed? Even Cabrillo board members? I'm sorry. Hi, Jack. Good to see you. Cabrillo board members, there we go. Donna, yeah, great. Yep, hi Donna, nice to see you again. Those folks volunteer countless hours, especially when things are going as they have been over the last couple years. I get the great honor of bringing a set of folks before you tonight that I would say is unmatched in many ways, that a community of this size has these many experts living amongst us, going to the grocery store with us, traveling the world and telling their stories about what we do here in Santa Cruz County, the kinds of science that we do, the excellence of our University, California, but also our CSUMB neighbor, and of course Cabrillo College, which is a great and amazing school to feed great thinkers. And I'm thrilled that one of our panels has a Cabrillo student on it this evening to talk a little bit about her work and what she'd like to see in her future. The first panel that we have tonight will be kind of a big picture panel. The second's going to be really about personal action. But before we hear from all of those folks, I want to introduce our opening and very esteemed first speaker this evening. I'm lucky to call John Laird, our state senator, a friend and a true mentor to me. And I think I've tried to come up with a short intro. So I think the best intro for John Laird is that he's a leader in so many different things. He's a leader in education. He's a leader in local government. He understands local government. He's brought that leadership to the state. But what has impacted me the most in my profession and who I am is John's work on the environment. He was former Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California. And during his leadership there, which I believe John was the longest secretary, I believe, that served, if I'm not correct, you correct me. But in that position, John pushed many, many, many outstanding agendas that the world looks at now. I've traveled a little bit in my time, and some of the policy frameworks that John put in place during his time as Secretary of Resources are going to benefit us now, and they'll benefit generations in the future of California. So he just has done an amazing job. There's not anyone that really does that breadth of diversity. And at the same time, he's probably been over at the levee today in Pajaro. He's probably driven down to San Ardo at the furthest south edge of Monterey County. Probably tonight he's driving to San Luis Obispo, if I know John Laird. So he is heart and soul. He serves you every day, and I'm thrilled that he can be here tonight. So, John.
That's really sweet. Thank you. And I hope everybody echoes what Donna said, but this has been quite a week, and there are people hurting in our region, and it's Big Sur around the Salinas River, especially in Pajaro, but the Santa Cruz Mountains and other places, and this is a time all of us need to step up. There's places out here you can donate, as was said, the community foundations, Community Action Board, lots of nonprofits. Please, if you just can, people need help, and they need help in messages too, because I think some people in Pajaro don't necessarily feel safe, and all of us need to say that you'll be safe and we will help you and we will provide resources. So please do that, and it's an amazing context for this. And just one anecdote that I was telling earlier tonight that I can't resist telling is at 5 a.m. Tuesday morning, I did 4 minutes live on NPR, their national news. I heard from anybody I ever went to high school with, but I discovered that NPR doesn't trust somebody on the West Coast to get up at 5 a.m. And so, unbeknownst to me, NPR did a wake-up call at 4:15 from the East Coast. So if you're ever on, hopefully you get the same service. And I think that I wanted to lead off and talk about climate in a lot of different ways. And it's so exciting to live in a community where this many people and this many booths and organizations are committed to working on this and committed to helping, because it is the existential crisis of our time. And sometimes we get so caught up in the programs or the work that we lose sight of communicating the urgency. And it is getting there in major ways. And when I was resources secretary, Lake Tahoe was heating faster than any freshwater lake on the face of the planet. Although after the snow up there, that's probably not true for the next few months. And the Paradise Fire went at 60 miles an hour, compared to the CAL FIRE chief at the time said, we used to, when I started firefighting, think that a 50,000 acre fire was the biggest fire we were going to have in the year. We'd have one. And that last year I was resources secretary, we had 5 before we were out of June. And we still had Paradise in front of us. And so the world is changing. We are in the middle of it. The debate should be over, and the urgency should come with everything we do. And last year, the year before, I think I want to talk a little bit about the state, a little bit about the world, and a little bit about locally as a place to kick this off. Because a year ago, September, on the last day of session, the toughest climate bill died on the Senate floor. I floor managed it. We passed it last year, but it only got 14 votes. It needed 21 of the 40 senators. And the Senate president said, we're not going to let this happen again, and appointed a 12-senator climate working group that bridged ethnic divides, geographic divides, political divides. And then she turned to me and said, and you're going to chair it. And so we had 25 meetings, starting with 9 stakeholder meetings: environmental justice, mainline environmental groups, business, local government. We went across the interests, and we saw where the divides were. And over those 25 meetings, as hard as it was, we pounded out sort of a platform that people could unify about. And last year, we had the most successful year on climate in the legislature, probably since the passage of AB 32 in 2006. And we kickstarted the different goals to make sure that we had interim and we really move. We tried to move to electric vehicles and equity in electric vehicles. Tried to move to capping orphan wells where we're not doing it, and it's a large methane release. We went through a whole host of issues and landed the bills on the governor's desk. And that was before the governor appeared with 3 weeks to go in the session and said, I want 4 big things. And he adopted my big bill as his 5th and made it a 5-bill package. And we got every single tough bill off the Senate floor. A few of them died in the Assembly, and I know Gail's going to fix that. But we really did a broad agenda. And even though I'm sure even in this room, there's a large split opinion about what to do about Diablo Canyon, I used that bill to get things we didn't get in the climate package. And so the governor wanted 10 or 20 years extension. I got it down to 5 so that when offshore wind comes on, the transmission, Diablo goes down, offshore wind takes the transmission immediately, we have it in place. And for all the climate package, we didn't have a lot of new electricity. And so we jammed, I called for a Marshall Plan of renewable electricity, and we jammed $1 billion to create renewable electricity into the Diablo bill, because that was an available vehicle at that point. So by the time we were done, we did a lot. And this year, we're trying to take some things to the next step and trying to make sure that we implement all that and really move on it, because it is really a move to electricity in California. And we have a lot to do if we're going to actually meet our goals. We're going to have to create an amazing amount of electricity. We're going to have to make sure there's an amazing amount of equity in how we do it. And those are big challenges. And so, but we feel like we are on the path, and that where California had lagged a little bit, we are back to our climate leadership, and we're doing it. So last November, I led a Senate delegation to the COP conference in Egypt, and we felt like California had a story to tell. And it was interesting because if you look at the climate conference globally, it's painful. There's 30,000 people there, and it's so exciting to find somebody in an Amazon headdress next to you and somebody in a dashiki on the other side, and feeling hampered by the fact that I only speak English and Spanish and I'm trying to figure this out. But I saw how people are doing things at the grassroots level everywhere. And we had to push. There were some good agreements in the end, but not enough. We're on the precipice. And there's certain things about a fund for losses and equity that was finally agreed to, some financing related to climate, trying to re-up some of the goals. But the problem with the United Nations is it can't enforce on other nations. So whenever there's an agreement, it's 100 different nations making their own commitment and enforcing it themselves. And so that's the problem, is making sure that it actually is implemented and actually happens. And I know there's somebody here from the Ocean Protection Council, and when I was Resources Secretary and Donald Trump was president, we had to decide that we had to lead if there was going to be no leadership on it nationally. So I went to the United Nations Oceans Conference and spoke for California, and we organized and the state is still working on an international alliance to fight ocean acidification, where we reached over our government and got individual governments and subnationals and others across the nation of the world to do it in a way that, you know, we got the Netherlands, we got France, we got Chile, we got New Zealand, we got various island nations I hadn't heard of before, and even the United Arab Emirates. And so it was something that then people could do that in the same way the climate agreement. And that is sort of what's incumbent on us, is to take that leadership and do it. And so we met when we were in Egypt. I think we did 3 different panels or press conferences. I did a press conference that was sort of in front of the whole group and tried to say, here's what California is doing. Here's what our challenge is. And we are a big emitter, but we are working on dealing with our big emissions. And for those, like some guy in Washington named Mitch McConnell, that says it's a business killer, we are moving to the 4th largest economy in the world in California, with having done the Kyoto Accords ourselves, and doing climate ourselves. So nobody can argue that economic growth is mutually exclusive from taking strong climate steps. And there's some things that are still very controversial, and we are trying to bridge that gap. I mean, last year in the legislature, we adopted a minimal form of carbon capture. Among environmental justice groups, that is not greeted warmly. And I think we wanted to make sure that no one did oil extraction and claimed credits under carbon capture, that it really was independent of the oil extraction process. And I have visited the 2 places in the world that do it. In Iceland, they are 100% renewable with thermal, and they pull carbon out of the air, create bricks, bury it in caverns. And there's one in Vancouver that I visited last summer that is on a way of doing it a different way. And Governor Newsom said, I don't see how we can do it 100% by cutting back emissions. We actually have to reach into the air and pull out carbon as part of it. that is still very controversial. And we are trying to figure that out in a way that there's still equity to it and it's still environmentally sensitive. And we talked to people in the world about that. So now we really have to act locally. And what the storms have done in the atmospheric rivers, there are some really textbook cases of impacts and what we have to do right here. When the storm of 82 hit, and it was my misfortune to have been on the city council about 6 weeks when it hit in January of 1982, and it rained something like 16 inches in 36 hours in the Santa Cruz Mountains. There were these huge redwood trees and things that came down the San Lorenzo River, which almost went over the levees, and one of them battered down our bridge at Soquel. That bridge came down in that storm. And so, and I'd like to give the city council credit, but the city manager at the time really spearheaded it. Over the next 10 years, we took the 4 bridges in the city of Santa Cruz that were the city of Santa Cruz over water and Laurel and Soquel and to the beach, and those bridges were arced. You'll notice it now. Be conscious of it the next time you go over it. And so in the storms we just had, the water flowed under them fine. But who didn't do it? One was Caltrans on Highway 1 on the first bridge coming into Santa Cruz. So it was closed for 2 days while cranes took the debris off. And then in the later storms, there was flooding in the area that might be attributed to that. I don't want to be called in a lawsuit, but you might make a connection to it. And in Soquel, the bridge is flat. There were issues there. In Capitola, while everybody was focusing on the water coming in, actually stuff got caught in the bridge and some of the houses back up Soquel Creek flooded. And so as a climate resilience project, we have to look at bridges. We have to see if we're going to lift them. And the mother of them is Highway 37 across the North San Francisco Bay that goes from Vallejo over to by Novato and San Rafael. And water covered that highway at least twice in the last 4 winters. And with any rate of sea level rise, that is going to be completely covered and non-functional. And the estimates for making it a causeway or lifting it are over $1 billion. And right now, if it's the bridge at Caltrans and Highway 1 in Santa Cruz, or if it's that, it competes against all other transportation projects. We do not have an isolated resilience budget or program. And I have already been bringing that to the attention of the Caltrans director and OES and the governor's office and everyone, because if we have a climate bond, that kind of resilience has to be part of it. And it means also that we just have to totally act locally. This is how it adds up. When we set those goals in 2006, everybody said, you didn't say what's coming underneath it. You didn't dictate the programs. But we met that goal 3 years early, and it's because people figured out how to do it. Well, we have to go up the next notch, and it's going to be really difficult. And there is equity issues. Like right now, multifamily housing doesn't usually have places for EVs. It doesn't usually help. We have to incent, do different things, because there are also people in the administration right now that argue that lifts the cost of housing. That's what we don't need. But we do need the transition. So how do we do them both? So we have a lot of challenges locally. And I think that sets it up. So we're in the middle of urgency. We're in the middle of the impacts. At the state level, we're taking lots of steps, never enough, and we have more to do, and we have to implement it. And at the international level, we have to pressure, and then we have to act locally, and it all fits together. And that's why you're here, to hear from all the panels that are going to talk about those different pieces. So thanks for letting me lead off, and I wish you.
now I can tell my mom that my state senator wears jeans and it's okay for me to wear jeans to events. It's always a big problem. So I just want to acknowledge right up front, climate change is a massive, it's the crisis of humanity right now. None of us have been through this. Nobody. And there's a lot of pieces to it, and I want to acknowledge tonight that because there's a lot of really good people doing this work. We're not here to talk about transportation, which is a primary contributor, and I just want to acknowledge that right up front. We're not here to talk about the urban environment and some of the built environment things that John mentioned in terms of, some of we know building electrification that can be done. So that I just want you to know we're not intentionally ignoring those big carbon contributors. And I'm really glad that many of the folks who came today had information about a lot of those programs. So please reach out to our exemplary environmental organizations that we were so fortunate to have out tonight. And please, find out about the programs because there are incentive programs coming, and hopefully the DWC can potentially tackle those subjects in a future forum. But for tonight, I think we all realize as we stand on this hill that Santa Cruz County is an extraordinary landscape. 50% of the county's land area is protected land. That's extraordinary for a county our size. We are so fortunate to live in this place. And this landscape is actually critical to helping us survive the impacts of climate change in the future. Many, many communities in the world would be very envious of what we have. And so our first panel is going to be sort of a landscape scale panel. And they're going to talk about our soil, our forest, and our coastlines. And they're going to talk about action and sustainability and resilience. And we all know about all the effects that we've seen over the last few years. We had the fires in 2020, the heat waves in 22, now the coastal damages of the winter of 23. And these are things that people are starting to see happening around them. Your kids are watching this happen. They're watching the wharf fall apart in Capitola. And everyone's wondering, is this the face of climate change and its impacts, or is this just weird weather, or the fact that we had a massive lightning storm that we'd never seen before in the history of Santa Cruz and it lit our north coast on fire? And I like to imagine examples of what could have been versus what is, and it helps me give some perspective to thinking about our landscape. So for example, during that 4 days in September over Labor Day weekend, we got up to, I think, 110 degrees in some places in this county. And a lot of us went to the beach. A lot of us went up to the redwood forests. Are those places going to be there 20 or 40 years from now? Are we going to be able to go to a redwood forest? Will the redwoods still be there? Or will those beaches that we went and took shelter on, will they be underwater? These are the kinds of things we actually need to be thinking about right now. And I just am very, very pleased that I was able to, all of the panelists this evening, I can't tell you how fortunate you are to hear from these folks. They're all accomplished and just we're very lucky to have them here tonight. So for our first panelists, again, we're going to be talking about soil, we're going to talk about the coast, and we're going to talk about forest. And the members of our panel, if you guys would come up and be in that table over there, the one with 3 seats. We have Gary Griggs, who is a distinguished professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at UCSC, where he has taught for 55 years. His research, teaching, writing, and lectures have been focused on the coast of California and include coastal hazards and the impacts and responses to sea level rise. So Gary is here on my closest to me. Sacha Lozano joined the Santa Cruz Resource Conservation District in 2011. Sacha's here on the far right. He is actively engaged in hands-on collaborative work to enhance environmental stewardship and agriculture on the California Central Coast. During the past 10+ years managing multiple ag-related projects, he has cultivated partnerships and addressed barriers to provide technical assistance, education, and outreach to growers in both Spanish and English, focusing on soil erosion control, irrigation and nutrient management, soil health, water quality protection, climate change mitigation, and carbon farming planning. And Sarah Newkirk, in the middle, is the new executive director of the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, whose mission is to protect, care for, and connect all people to the vibrant, natural, and working lands that are essential for our community and nature to thrive together for generations to come. Sarah is an energetic conservation strategist. She was previously with the Nature Conservancy for many years, with a passion for bringing nature into communities by uncovering the myriad values that the land has for people. She is a lawyer and a scientist with more than 20 years of experience in nonprofit environmental conservation. And so tonight, we're just really going to have a conversation. We're going to allow some time for you guys to ask questions of the panelists. So I'm going to kind of start off with some questions, and the panelists will, answer the question, but also add some of their own input. So my first question for this panelist, this is a little weird standing, so I'm going to swing around, look at you guys. There seems to be plenty of bad news for our landscapes when it comes to climate change. How do our communities plan for these changes, and at what scale can an individual engage? And so, Gary, maybe I'll start off with you. Next question. Yes. Sorry. Where's that mic?
It's on. Okay. Thank you, Donna. At a time when everything looks like it's going to hell, nationally, locally, certainly there's a lot of reason to be pessimistic. And we did a talk the other night the Natural History Museum put on between paradise and peril, or there's peril and paradise. So we have all these things that are affecting us, particularly on the coast this winter, with Westcliff and Capitola and Rio del Mar and Seacliff. I try to subscribe to two sort of concepts. One is called sober optimism. So we always need to have hope. As a father, as a grandfather, as a teacher, I think I need to exude hope. There are many who believe that somehow engineering is going to solve all the problems, or God. Prayers. I'd say that may be optimism, but it's not sober. The other phrase I like to use is aggressive incrementalism. Nothing happens overnight, locally, nationally, internationally. But at least California and John laid this out. From my perspective, we're going in the right direction. We're doing the right things, but it's like trying to move a supertanker. It takes a long time. Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So I'm going to provide a little historical perspective here. 53 years ago, before some of you were born, I taught the first environmental class on campus, and we put out a book after looking at Santa Cruz's local environmental problems called Santa Cruz and the Environment. We put it out in 1970. And there was a number of things that we were facing then. John will remember, he was a student then. He's actually my father. We had the world's largest nuclear power plant proposed at Davenport. And we actually a small group of Santa Cruz people called Atomic Test Site. This is dated June 1970. And through a lot of effort and time, that was turned down. Wilder Ranch was going to be converted to a subdivision of 30,000 people, and it was going to get annexed to the city of Santa Cruz. That got turned around. There was going to be a supertanker port at Moss Landing and a proposed refinery, an industrial corridor all the way to Salinas because of that deep canyon we could bring in supertankers. That was turned down. And you may all know that Lighthouse Field was planned for a convention center and a hotel. But each of those took people and time. But I remain optimistic that we have things we can do, but it's not going to happen instantly. There's an old African proverb that says, if you don't think little things make a difference, try spend a night with a mosquito in your room.
That's great. Thank you, Gary. Sarah, what are your thoughts about You know, we were seeing some of our infrastructure. John talked about this. You know, I mean, there's some that was pretty good forethought to raise those bridges. Not a lot of towns have done that. A lot of things that maybe wouldn't have made Santa Cruz what it is today were done early on. Do you think we should keep fixing things, or do you think we need to think about things differently in your mind? And maybe put that close to your mouth because it's a little low. I don't know if our AV guy is here. Maybe if everybody can hear it, but please, Sarah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Stand up. Unfortunately, with me, it doesn't help very much. So this is it. This is it. Everybody's been wondering what climate change will look like. This is it. We're seeing it. We're seeing it right now. We're seeing it with the floods on the Pajaro. We saw it with the years-long ridiculous drought that we're apparently still in despite all of this. We saw it with the wildfires. And this is it. And the window for stopping climate change closed many, many years ago. We still need to reduce our carbon emissions. We still need to sequester carbon because we need to stop this from getting a heck of a lot worse, which it's going to do unless we do those things. What we need to do is adapt. And I'm not totally avoiding your question, Donna,
Nope.
but just a quick pivot that is going to require both adaptation of our infrastructure and avoiding any more silly infrastructure decisions, right? There are some of these things that we never should have done in the first place. But the land sector has an enormous and important role to play in adaptation. That with well-managed floodplains, with floodplains that are connected to the actual rivers and restored to their natural function of absorbing floodwaters, that can save some of the damage from flooding that we're currently seeing. With well-managed forests, forests that are sustainably, the vegetation managed, that are with prescribed burning and effective management and some sustainable timber harvest, those forests will actually reduce the impact of catastrophic wildfire and become more lower-level fires. And with shaded fuel breaks, there will be areas for stopping the fire and places for our first responders to stage their activities. With estuaries that are restored and connected to their floodplains, the pressures on levees will be reduced. In our landscape, we'll still need those levees, but they can be setback levees. What happened on the Pajaro this past week was not inevitable. It happened because the planning that we have been doing, but apparently ineffectively or requiring too much time, it took too long. It took too long for us to get started. We all knew that the levees were going to fail, and we failed on vision. We failed on the cost-benefit ratios that the Army Corps does. And I'm a nature gal, but this is not a nature problem at this point. This is a people problem. These levees failed, and that the impacts are accruing to the people that are least able to manage those impacts. This is a people problem. We've got to deal with it. We've got to use the land, and we've got to adapt our infrastructure.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, Sarah's right. And I think, no other group that I know of in Santa Cruz County lives the difficulty of trying to get things done on the land than the Resource Conservation of Santa Cruz County. This is a very unknown group, unfortunately. And I'm just really pleased that Satya can be here to really talk about how a organization connects with private landowners and does a lot of work. On average, it takes 10 years to get an environmental restoration project permitted and built. 10 years. So to Sarah's point, it's taking too long, but people like Satya are actually doing this work and have been doing it for for over a decade. So I'm really, really happy he can tell his story.
Thank you. Can you hear me? It's difficult to stand in front of an audience and talk about these things. I don't think I can say anything that's not already in everyone's mind, and I think what I'll do is amplify things that most likely all of you are already thinking about. When asked this question, I immediately went to, well, how do we plan for this? What are the kinds of things we must plan for? And what we're planning for is increased uncertainty, less reliance on or reliability on known patterns or on anything that we thought we understood, we thought we could predict, we thought we could plan for. Higher frequency and intensity of swinging extremes. These are the changes that we're seeing, and we must plan and act to become more nimble, more adaptable, and be able to recover from impacts and bounce back from them at many levels, in terms of our landscape, in terms of our communities, in terms of our local economy, in terms of our infrastructure. So the problem is huge and is not something that any one individual can tackle all of its dimensions. So the second part of the question, like, at what scale can an individual engage? The only scale or the most effective scale is the human scale. Individuals can engage at a human scale with other individuals, interacting within the local community, like Senator Laird was talking about this. Engaging with local processes, tapping on whatever skills, interests, and strengths each one can bring to the table. And there are many pieces, and they're all interconnected that require multiple skill sets, knowledge, experience, and collaboration across sectors. So this is, I think, the scale at which we all must engage actively.
Thank you. When I contacted these folks to be on this panel, we had a quick call to kind of get our heads around what I was trying to kind of get across in this panel. And we landed on this thing, on this idea that, you know, we really need to think about right now, today, where we want to be in 50 years. And there's very few planning processes that ask you to do that. And I think this group kind of collectively landed on this concept and sort of thinking outside the box to get there. And it could be some of the things that Senator Laird mentioned. You know, what does a resilience fund look like? You know, how do we pay taxes for that? How does that get created so that we could potentially have gotten that levy done? I mean, it's been 30 years or almost 30 years since 1995. So, you know, how do we get more activity moving towards that vision? And, you know, we've seen a lot of damages, and I'm just curious, you know, you guys work in these different landscapes. You literally, you know, Sarah's looking at the forest, you know, Sacha's working on individual farms in Pajaro with farmers. Gary's been studying the coast for his whole career. So I'm just curious about how you guys would think about that. You know, is that the role of local government? Is it the role of the local community coming to electeds and policymakers and saying, look, we want these kinds of things in our community? How do you envision some of that? You know, how do we sort of get there at that 50-year place? Any ideas? I ask really hard questions.
Really good question. I think this winter has pushed everything forward. For example, West Cliff was a long-term plan, and all of a sudden it's in our face. Sea Cliff, the bulkhead there that supports the RV parking lot, has been destroyed 7 times since the 20s. And I keep sending notes to John about this to deal with it. And it's a difficult one because people of all incomes, unless you stay in the RV park, which is a little more expensive, can drive down on the beach and use it. But do we need to be able to park on the beach to use that? We decided finally the pier wasn't worth rebuilding. The ship is gone. But that's a good time to check and see, you know, what do the people really want? West Cliff is another one, and a group is formed. Tiffany is well aware of this, trying to say not what do we do now, but what do we want it to look like in the future? And I think there's just the beginning of a new process because of this storm, these storms, to say we really need to look at where we are. We know sea level's rising, and it's still only 5 millimeters a year. But we're having these extreme events, which are going to be much more important. Probably till mid-century, we had very high tides, very big waves, strong onshore winds, and rain, which were like, I don't want to use the word, but the perfect storm. And it's almost exactly what happened in 1982 and 83 together. One of those winters was flooding and landslides, and one was the coast. And both of those occurred this winter together. Doesn't happen every year, but that's going to be more important, in my view, probably till mid-century. And as Sarah just said, climate change is now. We're not debating this. Well, depending on which political party you're in, but I feel safe saying that.
Under this banner.
The jury isn't still out. You know, we know what's happening, and it's time to start, moving.
Great.
In answer to the question of whether to act locally, at the state level, or nationally, I'm going to stand up again for all the 1 foot it's going to give me. We need to use all the tools at our disposal. We need to act at all of those levels. We need to secure the funding at all of those levels. How hard is that going to be when attempting to work with the federal government? There's no question. FEMA comes with a ton of money, but it also has arcane formulas for figuring out who's going to get what, and tons of restrictions and constraints on how you can spend that money. And so those require systematic fixes, and we need to ask our elected officials at the federal level to demand that, because it's a moral imperative at this point. The same with the Army Corps of Engineers. There's a ton of money that flows through the Army Corps, but it's very, very hard to get it directed at what you need it directed. I think that we've got it secured for the Pajaro levees now, and now it's really a question of having action. When it comes to local, and Senator Laird and Assemblywoman Pellerin are doing a fantastic job of delivering the state budget. When it comes to the local resources, which we still need, because we will need them if we're going to overcome the hurdles of the federal funding and even some of the state funding, you're going to be asked to tax yourself, right? And your neighbors are going to be asked to tax yourself. And what are you going to do then, right? How important is it going to be then? And if the impact of these disasters is so far in the distant past that you've forgotten about them, and climate amnesia is a real thing, right? People forget about these disasters once the sun starts to shine again. That is going to be really problematic, because this is just going to happen again and again and again. So we need to act at all of the levels.
Okay.
So my work is in agriculture. I work with farmers.
Satya, can you stand up? Thank you.
What will the farmlands look like in 50 years? I have no idea, but I have some thoughts. So perhaps we'll see a completely different set of crops that are better suited for the changing conditions that are coming. Perhaps possibly we'll see more polyculture, more integrating farming systems that are more diverse and resilient. Hopefully a landscape that can slow, spread, sink, and store as much water as possible. So we have these guides. If you stop by the RCD table, we have this homeowner's guide for slow spread sinking or turning runoff into a resource in your home. But we need to think about these concepts at a landscape level, in our working lands. So store water during increasingly erratic, short but intense storms, or the trains of atmospheric rivers we're experiencing this year, where hopefully we'll see a landscape that can hold more moisture longer, more broadly, and be better prepared for droughts and fire events. So what does this landscape look like? Wider stream channels that are less constrictive of natural water flows. Restored floodplain, riparian, and wetland functions that allow for natural water dynamics, less development in high-risk areas, a functional network of storm runoff collection and aquifer recharge basins throughout the landscape to capture as much water as we can during short periods of time, higher connectivity of natural habitats that are interwoven with farmlands, wider buffer zones, protecting farm fields, residential areas, and riparian habitat from the influence of each other, or even better, building a mutually beneficial influence among them. a spongier type of soil that can infiltrate better water, hold more water, and that remains covered and held by living roots at most time. So the list is long. And all of this will absolutely matter to our communities. This was part of your question. It will determine whether or not we can continue to live off this land. So thinking about how we are engaging in our relationship, in our interaction with the working landscape is absolutely critical. And how we think about preparedness and response, I thought of 5 things. Long term, think several generations down the road. Systems, so think about patterns, think about flux, trade-offs, feedback loops, leverage points. This is a complex situation. Multiple dimensions, risk assessment and mitigation. How much damage can we avoid or prevent by thinking and acting ahead of time? And number 5, redundancy and resiliency. How can we improve our ability to recover and bounce back from shock and disaster? So these are the questions, or not the answers, the questions, the types of things that we ought to be considering when thinking about this problem.
Thank you, Sacha. So, as I said, these folks have been thinking at these landscape scales, and the next panel is going to bring us down to some really specific, local things that you can do, things your family can do. We have a few minutes for questions, and I'm happy to have Peggy grab the mic. So if you do have a question, we'll probably be able to fit. Let me just look at my schedule, because I'm supposed to be taking care of the schedule too. So I think we've got time for at least 3 or 4 or 5 questions. So Peggy, you pick. We got Carol here in the front.
Reminder that no speeches, just a question.
I think John referenced it. Is there, in fact, a ballot proposition being prepared whereby the people of California tax ourselves? You made a reference to it, so I'm wondering if it's in the works. Is the legislature going to put something on the ballot?
Will there be a new climate bond, John?
Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, John said that there is a climate bond be under consideration, but in a big state like California, it's in competition with other needs: transportation, schools, other things that other communities need as well. So it's still sitting on the desk, and it sounds like the battles will begin to see what makes it onto the ballot.
One of the things I think about, and these are kind of interrelated, is how do we, so day to day here, as an academic myself, we're fortunate enough to be here, but day to day there are people that are just literally trying to survive, get to work, make their money, make their income, feed their kids, and do that kind of thing, and that's the majority of our community. So how can we help to shift people's behaviors? For example, get them on public transit, which leads to the next part of my question, is how can we help to shift corporate aspects which are really prioritizing things that don't help to push forward, for example, transportation. Instead of funding public transportation, we're still funding roadways and that sort of thing. So how can we, in this small group of people who are very active and very passionate, help to get it out to these larger and more difficult layers?
Any answers on that one, folks?
I'm going to offer something that answers that tangentially. So there are those people who make things happen, those people who watch things happen, and those people who wonder what happened. And I think by being here tonight, you are the kind of people who make things happen. And I often get asked something like what you just asked: what can I do? What can I do as an individual? And I say there's one thing everybody can do, everybody has to do. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's really easy. Vote.
I think that we also owe it to ourselves to give voice to the people whose voices need to be heard and that are not often heard in these forums. And if you will indulge me, Donna.
Please. Yes, that's a yes.
Okay, if you'll indulge me, I reached out to a flood-impacted individual who is in the land trust orbit, and I said, what would you like the people in this room to know? And she said, the scary and isolating feeling of not being important enough to those who live comfortably and make decisions is a deep, sharp pain in my heart, because somehow, as an expression of my dignity, I know I am, and all the people living in Pajaro are, important, worth the cost of fixing a levee so this doesn't happen again. We are not only valuable as workers and consumers, the recovery is not only of the physical land, but on our bodies. There's so much healing to do that unfortunately will become invisible in a matter of months. What you can do is make sure that it doesn't become invisible and that you remember.
Yeah. Satya, do you have a quick response on that one?
Yeah, thank you. That was great, and sort of what I was going to say is, yeah, it's easy to see people during emergency and dire situations, but it's not as easy to see them when nothing is happening, and I think that's where the key lies, that keep seeing the needs where they are, and meeting people. This is part of our work at RCD with farmers. Mm-hmm. We show up every day or constantly to try to help growers who are limited resource, historically disadvantaged, and the key to our work is to show up enough times, build enough confidence that we can become a reliable resource to them, a trustworthy resource.
Next, two more questions. Tracy?
Hi, my name is Joy Flynn. It's directed to you, Sarah. In the first question that Donna asked, part of your answer, you said a few times, it's a people problem. So I wanted to understand a little bit more what you meant about that and meant by that. I think I understand where you're going, and you kind of said it in your last answer, but if you could expand on that for everybody a little bit more, please.
Thank you for the question. The Land Trust, as Donna read our mission when she introduced me, the Land Trust's mission is to protect, conserve, and connect people to the natural and working lands of Santa Cruz County, because they're extraordinary and they provide so many values for people. And I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to, is that I'm an environmentalist, but I'm a nature for people person. There's, and I think that there were a number of stages in the environmental movement dating back to the 60s and 70s, nature for nature, in which we bought lands and we kept people off it. We put fences around it and we kept people away from it. There's nature for economy, and now I would say that we're into the era of nature for people, and that's so important to bring people into connection. Donna mentioned that we have 60% of our lands in Santa Cruz County are protected, and that's wonderful. But we need to make sure people can get to them and connect to them and love them and become the next cycle of future environmentalists so that their children continue to love them and connect to them. We also need to care for them, and organizations like the Land Trust and other land managers are doing that. It's expensive, it costs a ton of money. I have a small staff and all of them are working like crazy, and they're not paid enough money to get out there every single day and work hard to take care of those lands and manage them for resilience so that they can deliver that function to people. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly.
Thank you. Well said.
Put. Yeah. Very well
Our
put.
last question.
So
She said an investment in people is an investment in the environment.
Yep. One more question right here.
Hi there. So in your panel, I heard one point that really gave me pause and a serious cause for concern was that you said it takes 10 years to execute on many of these plans, and yet realistically, we need by 2030 we need to have a 40% carbon reduction globally to have a credible line of sight to a 1.5 degree scenario. That's 7 years away, 82 months. I mean, if we talk about it in smaller time scales, that's a very, very short period of time. And so how is it that we are going to reduce some of the barriers? I work in clean energy. One of the biggest barriers is permitting and the ability to actually get these assets built. How are we going to reduce some of the bureaucracy that is in place, for good reason in many cases, but to get out of our own way and enable ourselves to actually make this transition?
Everybody's going to look at John for that one. That's your swan song right there. Sir, come on up.
We know it. And so there's tons of, the tough challenge is, as you said in the question, how to move it quicker but not relax the environmental standards. That's what I successfully fought for in Diablo. So the Coastal Commission was allowed to stay in it, but their process was limited. And you know, everybody's been talking about the Pajaro River levee. It is 100% funded. We got this done. And as I said at the celebration last October, I hope to God it doesn't rain before this construction happens. And so oh, there went an assembly bill. And so the thing is one of the two things. It's design and the regulation you talked about. So I got the governor's commitment last night that they will work with us to shorten the regulation for the Pajaro project to get it started sooner coming out of this. And so we just have to do that on a broader scale. And we're lucky to have the transmission for Diablo for offshore wind, but the Humboldt has no transmission. And it has a real tough timeline to do it. And I'm beginning to think we're going to have to do the ocean floor or do something, because even with relaxed permitting, we can't get the transmission up at the same time the turbines will be up. And so those are the challenges. And we're looking at all the ways not to relax the environmental protections, but to move it quicker. And when I said there's follow-up items, this is one that, you know, I had to leave for another event, and I don't want anybody to think it's because I answered a question and ran out the door. So, but I'll happily meet with you. We're going to work on this more.
So we're gonna thank you, John. Thank you. I think Gail's first bill is going to be AB 356. It's John's fault, or John's going to. We're going to take a quick break, but before we go, I do want to make a quick announcement about an event being hosted by the Humanities Institute at UC Santa Cruz. It's called The Deep Read, and this is also part of one of our sponsors. Well, one of our sponsors is Lookout Santa Cruz. So first of all, I want to also recognize them tonight and thank them. And so glad they're in town. And one of their writers, many have gotten hooked on the community voices or the editorials part of Lookout, is involved with this group, which is called The Deep Read. This is a new program at UCSC. And on May 21st at the Quarry, they're hosting Elizabeth Colbert. And if you haven't read her books, you should. And she is a Pulitzer Prize-winning science journalist and a New York Times columnist. And they'll also have Ezra Klein there that night as well. And so this is at 4 p.m. at the Quarry. And Jody is in the back there. Jody, wave your hand so people can see you. If you have any questions, there is no cost. You just got to get up that darn hill. And you absolutely have to walk or ride your bike. You cannot, or the bus, ride the bus for sure. But don't drive, okay? So please attend this if you can. And there's some posters in the back.
Don't go.
Don't go yet.
We have one quick announcement. There's a group of, I think your junior and high school students throughout the county that are part of Students for Environmental Action. Is that right? Amity Sandage is there. And one of our students, one of their students, is just going to speak to us for just a few minutes about their project. Zahir Sabah. Come, you have that one.
I would like to take a moment to share that my heart goes out to the families of Pajaro who have been displaced by the storms and the floods. Here we are witnessing the devastating consequences of climate change and its inequitable impacts on the most vulnerable among us. Good evening. My name is Zahir Sabah. I'm a junior at Aptos High School, and I've been a part of Youth for Environmental Action for the past 2 years. Our student-led organization proudly has members from all over the county, and our membership continues to grow. Our primary focus is to raise awareness about environmental issues, from broad ones such as climate change to local ones such as school policy, in order to inform and empower people within our community. Through these efforts, we hope that we can create local change in policy, legislation, and individual decisions. Community involvement is equally as important to us, as the only way to achieve these goals is through organized efforts. Each of us shares a passion for the environment and its preservation, sharing our perspective as the youth of this county. Every year, we host a summit where hundreds of students from across the county can learn about pressing environmental issues in our community. Last year, we hosted over 150 students at Harvey West Park. At the summit, we participated in interactive workshops about a variety of important issues, such as wetlands, ocean pollution, and extreme weather patterns. It also offers an opportunity for adults to discuss these issues and learn about student perspectives. This summit helps raise awareness to our community and allows the students to research topics they're interested in, brings in new members, and inspires young people to engage in environmental advocacy and justice. This summit's theme is empowering teens to climate action, to inspire tangible local projects and create hope for a sustainable future. Young people often feel that their perspectives are ignored or tolerated but not valued, so we felt it was necessary to begin a county-wide survey that collects and documents the perspectives of young people when it came to environmental issues. This year we have collected nearly 1,300 responses from over a dozen schools, and we have learned a great amount from the youth perspective. For example, we have learned that only 26% of students were satisfied with the recycling programs in their schools, and that only 35% of students thought that their schools were doing a good job of promoting environmental sustainability. These are worrying statistics that emphasize the need for change, especially at the school level. Adult decision makers need to know that our perspective is vital to the success and well-being of the youth. Our voice must be heard. We often hear that our generation is self-absorbed, or lazy, or unwilling to be bothered. However, our data reveals that over 70% of the youth are either concerned or very concerned about the environment. Among us, you will find a diverse and committed community ready to stand with you, to take bold action, to continue to fight the battles you have waged. In this room, we see the contrast of Senator John Laird, who recently exited, and who has dedicated decades to environmental action, and me, who is only beginning to find his voice and figure out his future. And yet we stand together as one, for it is this intergenerational coalition that is our only hope for a sustainable future. Thank you.
I think I just lost my job. We're going to take a break, but I do want to really recognize, we have a lot of young people here tonight. We really tried to reach out to some of the schools, and we're just really happy that you guys are here. And I just want you to know that this work is your future, and you are capable, and you will change the world when you do this work. And it is inspiring work to do every year. So when you think about jobs, think about working for the environment. It's the most important thing you can do. Okay? So don't give up. They're great jobs, and we can help you get connected. Hi, Matt. I want to recognize Matt Wetstein, and I really want to also recognize Cabrillo College, because in this particular, where we are this evening, besides the breathtaking light and everything else about it, this is a learning laboratory about how to care for the environment right here at the top of this hill. And Matt has been just so grateful they've given us this facility tonight, and we're just really thankful to be able to host you all in such a beautiful place. And Peggy, what else was we?
Another dignitary who snuck in, Farah Sabah, our CEO, our superintendent of schools. And in case you didn't know, that was his son, and Blanca's there too. Thank you so much. Yeah. So what, 5 minutes?
We're going to take literally 5 minutes. Well, yeah, 5 minutes. You got to be back in here. We got a great panel next, and please make it quick. If you could come on in from out in the lobby and grab a seat, we're going to get started. And I want to let everybody know that I did learn a little bit more about this event. You can also sign up at the Deep Read. Go into that, search on that, get into that website, and you can sign up. You'll be getting emails and some preparatory types of reading and other things to do, and ability to really interact leading up to this event. So please remember that, the Deep Read, so you can get into that. Okay, thank you everybody for hanging in with us. It helps. It's a beautiful evening. Next, we're going to have a panel of some of our local climate experts, people who have been working to develop climate action plans for our community, as well as a student from Cabrillo College is joining us on this panel. So, and our Natural History Museum, which is the oldest nonprofit in Santa Cruz. It's 140 years old this year. And to introduce this panel, I want to welcome Supervisor Justin Cummings from the 3rd Districts. Justin is a former colleague of mine. He chose to continue in elected office, and that's so exciting. And congratulations on your win and your start out as a supervisor. Justin is also an esteemed scientist and has a long career and history working with the ecology and environmental sciences departments up at UCSC. So I want to have Justin say a few words about really bringing this down to personal action with your local neighborhoods, families, and individuals, and just thrilled he can introduce our panel tonight. Thank you. Thanks for being here, Justin.
Similar to the last young person who came up here and spoke with you all, when I was a kid, I was really inspired to work on the environment through things like Captain Planet, buying dolphin-safe tuna, recycling, and all those things made an impact on me and made me want to help try to save the environment. And so went to college and got a degree in biology, went to UCSC for my PhD and did work in tropical forest restoration. And so, it really is about cultivating that next generation of folks who are going to come behind us and take care of our natural resources and our environment. So I don't know if I should have the panel come up here first or if I should.
Yeah, they can come up.
Yeah, if you all want to come up and then I can say a few words and then turn it over. And I really did want to, with everything that's been happening in our community, really wanted to frame what I'm about to say kind of in the perspective of diversity and a lot of the work that I've actually done over the years about increasing diversity in the field of environmental conservation. Protecting our environment means we all need to do our part, and everyone needs to be included, especially those who have been historically excluded and negatively impacted, which we know has historically been people of color. And the reason why this is so important now is because the U.S. is becoming more diverse. In 2020, 43% of the U.S. population in the census identified as people of color, which is up from 34% in 2020, which means that we're going to see a majority minority population here probably within the next 10 years. Yet when we look at who we see represented in the environmental movement and the jobs in the environmental sector, it's quite the opposite. Green 2.0 is a study that's produced and it focuses on diversity in environmental fields. And one of the most recent studies from 2018, they found that the largest 40 NGOs, of the largest 40 NGOs in the United States, only 20% of the staff and 21% of the senior staff identified as people of color. So we know that this isn't because people of color don't care about the environment, right? It's about overcoming barriers to getting people into those jobs and into higher levels of leadership. We also know that lower income minority communities lack access to the outdoors and to a clean environment, and are often not prioritized when we invest in infrastructure to protect communities from the impacts of climate change, as we just saw in Pajaro. My hope is that as a community, we create space for people who have been historically excluded from the conversation around environmental protection and give them a seat at the table. My hope is that we increase funding for programs that create access to the outdoors for those who have not historically had access. My hope is that we create a pathway for upward socioeconomic mobility so that low-income people of color are not simply focused on their survival and can have the space and time to engage in these conversations and in the world around them. Because if we're going to live in a nation that will be majority people of color, their voices must be included in the conversation so we can create solutions together.
Thank you, Justin.
And so with that, I will move on to introducing our panel full of many amazing people who are going to let us know how we can all take action individually, as families, and as community members. The first person I'd like to introduce is actually someone who I overlapped in grad school with, which is Dr. Tiffany Wise-West. Dr. Wise-West is the Sustainability and Climate Action Manager at the City of Santa Cruz, California. She is a licensed professional civil engineer with over 25 years of experience in municipal environmental planning, programming, policy and infrastructure development, and implementation. Drawing on her interest in innovation and education, she specializes in collaborating across public, private, and academic sectors to deliver impactful and award-winning emissions mitigation and climate adaptation initiatives. Our next panelist, Alex Yasbeck. Alex is a civil and environmental engineer who works on implementing the City of Watsonville's Climate Action Plan. Alex appreciates the technical and pragmatic solutions to climate change challenges, but is also deeply fascinated with how we've arrived at this point in history and where we might go from here as a species. Our next speaker, Felicia Van Stolk. Felicia Van Stolk was born and raised in Santa Cruz County. She studied marine biology and conservation ecology at UCLA and has been an environmental educator across the state for over 10 years. She has been the executive director at the Museum of Natural History since 2019. Our next panelist is Samantha Wax. Samantha Wax is a student here at Cabrillo College studying environmental science. They have a certificate in sustainability and hold an internship with the United States Geological Survey in hydrology and has worked on projects complying with NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. Their long-term educational goals are to continue on to law school to become an effective advocate for environmental issues from the policy side of things. And our last speaker is Tatiana Brennan. Tatiana is a senior administrative analyst with the Santa Cruz County Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience. Tatiana received her BA in anthropology from UC Santa Cruz and her master's in social welfare with an emphasis on management, policy, and planning from UC Berkeley. With a background in planning and evaluation, specifically for government-funded projects in under-resourced and marginalized community, Tatiana brings a combination of data-driven strategic systems design and community coalition building engagement strategies that promote equitable resource acquisition. And with that, I will turn it back over to Donna Myers.
Thank you, Justin. So yeah, I'm pretty wowed by all those bios and thrilled to have this group here tonight. I'm going to start really with a question around, for the panelists, a little bit about our climate action plans, because I know some people are really sort of been tracking those. So maybe just a few minutes on sort of the plans. They're individually tailored to each community. And there's actually various ways that people can get involved through those plans. So I'd love to and so that is going to be mostly for the 3 climate action managers over here. And then we're going to touch a little bit with Felicia on some work that they're doing with actually doing citizen science, which I'm a big fan of, which really is getting out into the woods and taking pictures of the plants that are growing back up in the CZU burn area, and using that, that immersion in nature to not only document what's happening on the planet, but also to hopefully find a little peace for yourself. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that, but I'm going to start off with some of the climate plans. And I want to just recognize the city of Scotts Valley and the city of Capitola. We did not engage with them on this, but we did confirm their work, and they do have climate action plans. So if you live in any of those cities, that is a place to engage, and I want to recognize that those cities are working hard on these plans as well. So I'll turn it over to the climate managers for a little bit here, and then we'll move on from there.
So hi, I'm Alex. I work for the city of Watsonville. One of my goals tonight is to not get fired, so hopefully I don't say anything too radical. I'm a little disappointed that John left. I was hoping to sort of rib him a little bit. So one of the things we say a lot in climate action is yes and. We historically have grown up in a culture where it's either or, this or that. And anyone who's done any science or engineering, you know that that's sort of how it's taught. You choose between 2 options. Which option are you going to go for? And climate work is actually more of a yes and this, yes and that. And that's where I wanted to start tonight. Yes, the city has a climate action plan, and you can check it out online. I don't think anyone in this room actually wants to hear about it. There actually isn't anything in there you don't already know. It says, yes, transportation is our biggest source of pollution. Yes, we need to electrify. Yes, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. And in fact, every climate action plan out there essentially says that exact same thing. And so what I really want to talk about here is what do we do? Where do we go from here? Because you're all in this room. I don't think anyone here doesn't know what they should be doing. You know you should be walking more. You know you should be riding your bike. You know you should be eating less meat. But are we doing these things? And for me, I've been frustrated for years and years and years because I've been doing these things and I see people around me not doing them and I think, what's going on? Why do I do this and nobody else does it? And really, it was working in Watsonville that opened my eyes to the reality, because we are in the Santa Cruz bubble. And suddenly I was in Watsonville, and I'd say to people, hey, do you ride your bike? And they go, are you crazy? Have you seen this road? And I say, hey, have you put solar panels on your house? And they say, I don't own my house. And I say, would you consider eating less meat? And they say, look, I work 2 jobs. When I finally have time to relax on the weekend with my family, you think I'm going to go eat some meat substitute when all I want is some traditional meal with my family? And suddenly I realized, oh, why are all the bad options, the wrong options, the climate damaging options, why are those the cheap options? Why are those the easy options? Why are those the only options? And suddenly it made sense. Oh, we've created a system that doesn't work. The wrong choices are the easy choices. And so really, I owe it to the community of Watsonville to say, yeah, this is why I get it now. Something is completely wrong. And so really, the answer, the question now is, why? How did we get here? And so I want to go back and sort of say, how did we end up here? And you could say, oh yeah, it started with the Industrial Revolution. And I'm like, no, I don't actually think so. You could say, well, it was when humans discovered agriculture, that we stopped being hunter-gatherers. And I don't think that's it either. So I think the real problem started probably 300,000 years ago, give or take 100,000 years. As a species, we suddenly stopped being part of nature. We somehow discovered a way to separate ourselves from nature. And there's all these different theories as to why, whether we suddenly discovered magic mushrooms, whether our prefrontal cortexes suddenly grew, whether we killed our primary predator, whether we discovered fire, whether we created complex language, but somehow we split off from nature. And we then went on to do the most massive destruction imaginable. And I think that's the other thing that's missing in this conversation is we're talking about climate change, we're talking about carbon dioxide, we're talking about fossil fuels. But really, we've trashed our oceans, we've burnt our forests, we've polluted our rivers. Everything we do as modern people is destructive to the planet. And I think that's what's missed in this conversation. So yes, we have a climate action plan. Yes, it talks about reducing fossil fuel consumption, but it doesn't really get to the point of how are we living on this planet? And that to me is the only question we should be asking. Hallelujah. Thank you. And so, what do we do now? So I want to thank Karen Groppi, who's a professor here at Cabrillo College. She said, yeah, absolutely deserves a round of applause. Karen said, we've lost touch with ourselves, we've lost touch with each other, and we've lost touch with nature. And so really from this point on, I think our primary work should be getting back in touch with ourselves, getting back in touch with each other, and getting back in touch with nature. And I don't know really what that means or how we do that, but I know we need to do it, and I know we all can do it. And I feel like once we do that work, we will then create the systems that don't destroy this planet. And that's suddenly the only option, the cheap option, the easy option is the right option because we will have created the systems that we need. And I wish I could say, oh, it looks like this or it looks like that, but and I'm looking at the high school students, it's on you guys because we've unfortunately done the wrong thing. And it's at this point, I don't know what to do, but I know that it has to start somewhere. And it starts with me, it starts with connecting with people, and it starts with connecting with nature. So I apologize that I probably went way over time with that. And I'll pass it on to Tatiana.
Thank you, Alex. I feel like we can always depend on you to keep it real, and we appreciate that. So I want to talk a little bit about what the County of Santa Cruz is doing, really because the County of Santa Cruz is not entirely new to the climate realm, but we haven't really stepped out into it. So this is really our debut in some sense. And so I want to introduce you to some of what we've been doing. First of all, the county is the second largest employer, the County of Santa Cruz, second largest employer in the county, and the largest operating entity. So we have a policy footprint that is significant, and we take that very seriously. We just came out with our 2022 Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and you'll see the things that Alex talked about. We have, we're working to get to zero emissions in 2045, like both of my colleagues are in their jurisdictions. And we're implementing strategies to get there, working from home, installing heat pumps in our facilities, electrifying our vehicle fleet. But we're also doing things that aren't necessarily typical in a CAP. And two of those things are we are really building out the social capital of youth in our county. And when I say that, I mean youth throughout our county. And our focus is really on South County and areas of the county where there may not be as much emphasis and access to environmental programs. So we have a fellowship program. We have 4 interns right now. We have Ian Nieves and Jennifer Hernandez. Could you please stand up? They're here tonight. And they're both Cabrillo students. And we also have Kathleen McLaughlin. I don't know if you're here, but there she is, CSU Monterey. And we also have Rowena Bush, who is not here tonight, but she's from UCSC. So you can see we're trying to get somebody from all throughout the county. And this is a year-long fellowship. It's paid. The intention is that we want to have people in this internship that will benefit from this and also learn how government works so that hopefully they will come back to us and work and environmental policy. So we encourage them to get involved at the top levels of government, which they do, and we have seen them grow into taking board positions, taking leadership positions in nonprofits in the community. So that's something that we're really promoting in the county, and I wanted you to know that, and if you could, spread that word wide about this program, we'd like it to get some more daylight. One other thing is that we promote native planting. So I'm sure a lot of you know about the importance of that. You know that we have suffered from the CZU fires, and that's another part of our CAP, is promoting native planting and also vegetarianism in our facilities. So if you think again that we're the largest employer, we are the largest operating entity, the changes that we make in county facilities have a major impact in our county. When we implement a work from home policy, think of the hundreds of people that are not on the road that are staying at home. So just want to share a little bit about what we've been doing, and I want to make sure that Dr. Weiss-West has plenty of time to talk.
Thank you, Tatiana. So these two are a hard act to follow, but as they mentioned, our climate action plans are all very similar. We need to be doing the same kinds of things. And I want y'all to know that we are actually working together with Monterey County, with San Benito County, and other cities to bring in the dollars to our community so that we can put out those rebates to make sure that folks can electrify, especially folks from historically underrepresented or underserved communities. We have a little consortium called the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Project Working Group. The Community Foundation is our fiscal sponsor, and Ecology Action is our administrator. And we just have gotten this off the ground, so there's a lot of activity happening in that space. But I also want to get back to kind of springboarding off what Alex said about what we can be doing, what do we do. And I want to speak to the notion of eco-anxiety, right? Because this can induce a lot of anxiety. I see the young people like nodding their heads feverishly. And a couple things about eco-anxiety. Worry is an action, right? There's a great podcast episode by Citizens Climate Radio, and I know Citizens Climate Lobby's here, right? About eco-anxiety and what you can do. And some of the things are surround yourself with people who are like-minded and action-oriented. Celebrate the small wins, but go for the big incremental, what did Gary Griggs say? Aggressive incrementalism, right? So I think it's important that we remember those things because the eco-anxiety can become overwhelming. In terms of what can we do, which is why we're all here today, is I really want to stress the importance of every choice that we make. And also the thing on eco-anxiety is really important to come from a non-judgmental space, right? That's just going to turn people off. So every little choice, every little action, because collectively, these things add up. And I love to use the example of, my husband thinks I'm crazy, but I put a bucket in my shower, right? And every other day, I get like a gallon or two of water, gallons of water, right? That I can use to water my garden. Well, gosh darn, what if every single person in Santa Cruz did that? That's 65,000 people. That's 130,000 gallons a day. That adds up, right? So every choice, not to click, yes, I'm going to buy that Amazon, thing or whatnot. Or maybe one day of the week, the plant-based, right? And maybe even shift up a little bit on that. So I think that's really important. And the last thing that I'll say, and then I'll pass it on, is we're trying to provide tools for people to be able to do this easily. To number one, understand what your impacts are. And number two, what can you do about it that's tailored to your lifestyle? You may be a renter. You may own a home. What your high impacts are going to be different, right? And so we launched throughout the Central Coast, actually, and again, I got to give big props to Kirsten Liskey and Ecology Action for really shepherding this. We launched a community activation platform in Santa Cruz. It's called Resilient Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz County, it's Resilient Santa Cruz County. And for the Central Coast, it's all over the Central Coast, is Resilient Central Coast. And I encourage you to look it up and check it out because it is the one-stop shop where it has all the rebates, all the information you need, deep dives, short dives if you want, to help you understand what is your impact and what are the tailored actions you can take in order to reduce your impact. And again, I just want to encourage you to remember that collective impact, it adds up, and also the notion that, and I think maybe Supervisor Cummings said this, that imparting that to your community, to your family, to your household, it's going to ensure longevity and perpetuity of this kind of behavior and actions. So I'll stop there.
Next, I'm actually gonna have Felicia speak next, and then I think we're gonna end with Samantha, because we kind of want her perspective, really, because she's really starting out in this world. She's watching this world change before her eyes, and I think, her voice is really important to have at the end. And so, Felicia, I think you have some really great things to say following those three.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you asked me to talk about citizen science, community science, which I will do, but as with everyone else, we're going to take a little departure from that too, because I had a conversation with my neighbor the other day who has an 8th grader, so not in high school, can't participate with the Youth for Environmental Action, and she used the word despair. Her child is despairing about the state of the world right now, and it's not just to get out of doing math homework, although that is part of their argument. And I was sort of thinking about that and thinking about what are the youth, younger than high school students, early elementary school students, how are they perceiving all of this, right? Many of us, most of us, have a connection with nature that is one of joy and solace and peace and security. But for many young people, their relationship to nature is tumultuous and scary and dangerous and volatile, and they don't get very many opportunities to go out and have fun anymore. The access isn't there, and that baseline, the shifting baseline, we talk about shifting baselines in ecology, what we understand to be normal. The shifting baseline of nature connection is really dramatic right now. We have kids who don't have that peace and solace when they go out in nature. So that just really resonated with me. And infrastructure and policy and transportation doesn't bring peace to a child. So I'm really glad that we have so many youth-serving organizations here today and youth who are involved and not despairing. It's really great, yes. Because to Donna's question, let's think about 50 years from now. In 50 years, I want my climate leaders to be working from a place of love and passion and connection, and not from a place of fear. And so in order to get that, in order to grow those leaders who love a beautiful nature and have this picture of nature as a place that is rejuvenating, we need to help them see that now. And it's really hard when nature is busting through your walls, literally, or burning you down, or smoky and making your eyes tear. And so again, let's not forget about the youngest people who are inheriting all of what we are working on right now, and really involve them, because I love what Sarah was saying, that nature is for people and that nature connection, and people need to be in partnership with nature. And so the Museum of Natural History that's been our mission for 117 years. Sorry. You added a few. We're being optimistic for our future. It's been our mission for a very long time, and I know it's a very similar mission to many of the organizations here today. That connection to nature is so important, and now I'll bring it back to community science, because community science also, community stewardship, these opportunities to go out and do a native planting, to pull invasives, to fix a trail. It's an opportunity to feel like you have something to do, but it's also an opportunity to spend time in nature with excited people who want to be active and who want to find a solution. And we need to remember to bring our kids along with us when we're doing that work, and to make sure that those opportunities aren't just for 18 and up where you can sign the waiver, because the kids really need to see that. and they need to see the plants resprouting at the base of the burnt tree so that they can see nature isn't scary, nature can be strong, it's not hopeless, and there's something to do, and there's something to aspire for and to have hope for. We did start the CZU and U program almost immediately after the fires happened. I looked to Santa Barbara, where they had their big fires just the year before, and the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden was working with Ventana Wilderness to do this project, and it was one organization and one land manager to monitor the recovery and the issues, which place looks like it's going to be vulnerable to a landslide. And they were able to get a lot done by taking pictures and noting location. And then I looked to Santa Cruz and the burned area, and I said, oh my gosh, we can't do this, because there are about a dozen land managers and there are people's homes. And so we shifted, and it wasn't so much about let's take the data, but just really let's teach people how to be out there and to look and to notice these things. And the first step that we needed to do wasn't to train people to identify native plants, which we did do, but was to just train people to be naturalists and train people to build that connection and to see the hope where it is. And sure, we'll start taking data and we'll start informing land managers, depending on where you happen to be, or individual property owners. And so, there's always those layers, and in such a complex tapestry where we have all these wonderful organizations doing the work and all these wonderful organizations managing the properties, it really takes that cohesion and that nature connection, which I'm so happy to hear everyone is keyed in on, realizing that we really need that connection to nature, where people just feel that heart pull to be involved. That has to be at the core of things. Again, because the policy, the infrastructure, all of that isn't going to motivate in the long term, in that 50-year horizon. So I'm thrilled to be part of this and to be part of that nature connection and education for youth through lifelong learning. It's really, I'm glad to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. And our last panelist is Samantha Wax, and as you heard in her introduction, she's been involved with sustainability efforts here at Cabrillo. So I've asked her to talk a little bit about that, and also just let us know, kind of as somebody who's entering her early 20s, sort of not as young as some of the folks here tonight, but looking at that future. Samantha, maybe just give us some thoughts, and what have you been thinking about through this tonight? And then we have one more speaker tonight, and then we are not going to take questions for this panel, unfortunately, because I want to try to get everybody out on time. And we have one last speaker tonight, so I want to allow time for that. So Samantha, please let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, thank you. So what I've been thinking about, actually spurred from what you shared, Sarah, about investing in people to allow us to invest back in nature. I feel like kind of what you said, Alex, about why is it so easy to do the wrong thing. I feel like so much of our society is broken or designed poorly. And I hope that this moment allows us to not only focus on the environment, but focusing on equity and making things better across the board, and saying like, hey, we went in the wrong direction for a while. And I feel like young enough and naive enough to feel like, hey, maybe things will get so bad that we can change the way things are. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I'm sure that everyone here at this table, and maybe even in this room, or anyone doing the work, thought that it would be easier to do. And I'm sure that it isn't. And I'm sure that there are a lot of barriers in place that probably were there for good reason, but I think that they are impeding what needs to happen. The urgency of this moment is so important. and I feel stifled in so many facets. And I feel worried for the younger generation that's increasingly digital and synthetic, and I'm so on board with bringing them into nature and having their connection to this land. And I grew up here. I love being a part of this community. I love how beautiful it is, and there's no way that I wouldn't fight for it and want to protect it. And I just in the work that I've done, and I shared this with Donna, because I work for the government, and we had to work with NEPA, and just everyone rolled their eyes about the extra paperwork, and I was just like, where is your head with this? Aren't we trying to make this better for everyone in the future? And I would love to see it at least incentivized or supported in some way. Like, yes, it may be extra work. Yes, it's going to be really hard. But can we all just agree that it needs to happen and help people get there, pay them well? And, I think that this is an opportunity where so much can happen, where so much before couldn't. And so that's all I really have to say.
I think you brought that home well. And I really want to thank the panel. I had all kinds of questions I was going to ask them, but this evening has just sort of become its own thing, and that's kind of where you just go, you know what? You write 7 pages, and you just go like that. I do want to close the evening inviting up just a wonderful person that I was lucky to meet when I was on the city council for a few years, and have been really inspired by her work and all of the people that she works across our county on the issue of equity and the issue that people like me have been standing in front of people for a long time, and it's time for me to probably sit down and let other people do this work. And I have learned things from folks, and I have been challenged by folks, and I try to take those things to heart, and I've learned a lot over the last 4 years. And what's lucky about, I think, where we are in Santa Cruz, we are a community that is not afraid to say things to each other, and I think that we all learn by doing that. So I'm just thrilled that Bella Bonner is here tonight as our final speaker, and I'm just going to do a quick introduction to her. Most importantly, she is a Cabrillo graduate. Bella also grew up in Santa Cruz, and she is a local entrepreneur, a visionary, and an award-winning change maker and activist working to help bridge our local community. In 2020, Bella followed her gut and organized the largest ever social protest gathering that Santa Cruz County has ever seen, with over 5,000 people in attendance. That was the day that Westcliff sort of tilted. Maybe that's why it fell apart this winter. While this was the first protest she organized, it was a great success and opened up a world of movement work to her. She then went out and organized the community to make space for Black and brown people at various paddle outs as a part of protests on the water in Santa Cruz to support Black Lives Matter. And I did that paddle out, and it was one of the most powerful things I had done. And I've been in a lot of paddle outs in different places around the world, and that was an impactful day. And beautiful photos that should be framed and put in all of our community places in this town. This led Bella to creating Black Surf Santa Cruz, where she is the founder and executive director for the award-winning organization, which aims to promote physical, spiritual, and communal wellness and healing through surfing, recreation, education, and advocacy for our local community. And I think these folks here right now, Bella, have queued this up, and you get to bring it home. So welcome, Bella.
Hi everyone, my name is Isabella Bonner, and as Donna mentioned, I'm the founder and executive director for Black Surf Santa Cruz. Our mission, again, is to promote physical, spiritual, and communal healing through surfing, education, recreation, and advocacy. And we do this by intentionally centering Black people, Indigenous people, and other communities of color. So I really wanted to take a moment and take a deep breath together to really absorb all of the information and goodness that we received this evening. And I'm super honored to be here and to have an opportunity to share my heart with all of you. So we spent some of this evening zooming in, going from a national scale to a local scale, all the way back down to our own individual action and responsibility. And as we close out this evening together, I want to spend a few moments dropping in and looking at our own personal responsibility and impact, while also spending some time zooming back out and visioning and dreaming together about how we as collective individuals can make a huge impact. Hope to me is contagious, and my goal is to have us all leave here today with the information and resources we just received and feel inspired to act upon it and to share that information with our peers. I was asked to close out and talk about personal action and hope and stewardship of our oceans and land. And when I first started brainstorming, I couldn't help but think about who does and doesn't have access to hope. Who has access to feelings of inspiration, access to knowledge and information in events such as this one, access to our natural resources? Who's missing from these conversations? How can we turn the feeling of hope into a state of forward momentum and action that doesn't leave us in a state of reactive despair, but rather leaves room for hope to instead emerge through the pain and through mindful response? And as I reflected, and as Felicia stated, the word despair kept coming into my mind. Sometimes it takes pain and friction and hopelessness and heartache to be able to know and feel how hope actually shows up. Despair and gloom are easy feelings to sink into, related to climate change, but it really takes courage and action to move towards hope. Hope is the cure for the despair that so many of us are feeling and longing for. So I started to think about what hope really feels like in my own body, what it sounds like, where I am when I'm feeling it, who's there, what was happening leading up to the moments, and I instantly thought about my first time riding a wave in the ocean back in 2020. That feeling of standing up and being held and supported by the ocean, while also being cheered on and supported by my peers and community, the feelings of pure joy and connection to our earth. I walked away from that experience wanting to create a lasting and intentional proactive space for Black folks and other communities of color to have that same access, joy, and hope that I felt that day. This feeling of hope came on the tail end of 2020, a year filled with despair and heartache, immense grief, turmoil, and pain. In 2020, we saw surges of hope come and go as we navigated social and political unrest, the pandemic, the CZU fires, and other human-caused disasters. I realized that in all of our movements and organizing, the pattern of reactivity is snubbing us of our ability to actually co-create solutions, be in true community, and create and maintain sustainable hope. When we come into situations in a reactive state, we don't leave room for sustainable relationships or sustainable hope. We need to approach these issues with a proactive and intentional lens and mindful response, or we're going to continue to be reactive and stuck in the patterns of history without foresight of how and where we've gone wrong and where we have room to improve. We talk about sustainability, but I want to talk about sustainable hope. We talk about climate action planning, but I really want to convince you that we need a community action plan for sustainable hope. We talk about eliminating carbon, but what about eliminating sacrifice zones? We need to be proactive and not reactive when it comes to people, not just trees and oceans or my newfound favorite surf break in town. I hear us teaching our youth to not buy plastic and to ride their bike to save the planet, and while that's great, I personally believe that the greatest individual climate action we each can take is caring for one another. After all, ecology really is the study of relationships between living organisms, which includes all of us. Climate change is a social equity issue. Environmental justice and racial justice are closely aligned, and there's actually a term for it that we see play out locally in our community called environmental racism. All of the greatest issues and fights of our collective lifetimes are intersecting and interwoven into the very fabric of how we each show up on an everyday basis. These issues are deeply entangled and enmeshed, yet somehow they exist secularly in our conversations. Hope for some and not for all is unacceptable. It's time for us to begin to do things differently and to proactively care for each other. We need to be proactively considering our most vulnerable and impacted communities in this fight. So again, I ask, who are we creating hope for? How can we, as individuals with the privilege of receiving this knowledge and information, be responsible for making sure people outside of this room have access to it? Our collective action item as a group is to make space and to ensure that we are always creating intentional access, to always question who is missing from these spaces and proactively make that space so that we can share access to hope. I thought I had my speech nailed down, and then the storms happened last weekend, and I watched again how the impacts of climate disasters so often most intensely impact people that look like me. Yet the conversations around it often don't include people that look like me. 4,000 homes were sacrificed this past weekend locally in Pajaro Valley, with most of them belonging to our farm workers. Many are the same individuals who worked through the poor air quality in the CZU fires in 2020 to provide our communities with food. Many are the same individuals who have not had work since January due to flooding of our agricultural lands. What do we need to shift or do differently to ensure that their voices are a part of this conversation? What is the value of our earth? What is the value of human life? To me, those two questions are intrinsically the same. Yet every single system we currently have in place places a numeric value on our worth and how much it costs to save the planet, how much it's worth to save the planet. We see this in the measures or lack thereof put in place to secure the Pajaro levee. We see this in the swift and rapid presidential response for Capitola. But where's the money, news coverage, and immediate coalition building for saving the beach flats or Pajaro Valley? These are just some of the ways that we are locally gatekeeping hope and making it inaccessible to our entire community. Sharing and sustaining hope and being in true lasting community is how we actually save our planet. It's up to us to treat our values as verbs and to cultivate and then sustain the world that we want to live in. Hope is something that we can collectively create and maintain within our community. Hope is the antidote to despair. Sustaining hope has to be about sustaining a sense of connection and responsibility to other people outside of our own personal networks. Hope to me is an active feeling that I'm not a bystander for, but it's an action and a verb. And I hope that you leave tonight feeling inspired and called to take personal action in this collective fight for our planet. With personal action comes personal responsibility. So I ask you again, what are we willing to do differently? How can we share hope with others? If we want to stop reacting, then it's time we have to be in community with each other and to build proactive relationships. Thank you all so much.
Wow. And really wow to everybody who was here with you tonight. And we're just really thankful that you came out. I want to recognize Peggy Flynn. And Tracy Weiss. And Cindy. Where is Cindy? Our mighty but small committee, which really was just sort of a ragtag situation. But Peggy, I think, she saw the need for the Democratic Women's Club of Santa Cruz County to start talking about climate change and about the environment and about community. And so I just think that is a very important thing that you've brought to us, Peggy. And I just really thank our electeds, Gail, John, all of you for attending tonight. And please drive home safely. And thank you again, Peggy.
Lots of men and people of all ages, and everybody's welcome. DWC.org. Please join and help us have more and more programs that are of interest and relevant to our community. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.